It's like
Yeah.
after a huge storm blows through, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of like dealing with the wreckage for days afterward. Power's out, trees down, just a whole mess.
Oh, totally.
Well, it turns out migraines, they've got an aftermath too, and it's called the postdrome. So today, we are diving deep, deep, deep into all this research you found on this often overlooked phase.
Yeah, and it's super interesting, right? Because most folks, even doctors, they zero in on the migraine attack itself. The really intense pain, that sensitivity to light and sound.
The worst.
The worst. But what happens after that pain finally chills out?
Right. It can't be smooth sailing after that.
Well, a lot of people, they experience these lingering effects that stick around for hours, sometimes even days. Makes it tough to bounce back, feel like themselves again. And that, my friend, is the postdrome.
So we're not just talking like feeling a little drained after a bad headache here.
Oh, no, not even close. It's a whole separate phase. The International Headache Society, they actually define it as the period after a migraine headache fades, but before a person's truly back to their baseline.
Okay, so there's a clear distinction. It's not just like, oh, I'm recovering.
Exactly. And the research you dug up, it gives us this really intriguing peek into what that experience is really like for people.
All right, so let's unpack this postdrome thing.
Right.
What kind of symptoms can pop up during this phase?
Sure.
Because I was skimming through the research, and it seems like it's not just one thing. It's like a grab bag of unpleasantness.
You are spot on, my friend. It's surprisingly diverse, the ways postdrome shows up. So some people, they get hit with fatigue that's way beyond just tired. We're talking utter exhaustion.
Oh, I can't even
They're
imagine.
completely drained, no energy. And then others, they wrestle with what they call it, brain fog.
Oh, yeah. Like you can't think straight.
Yeah, trouble thinking clearly, can't concentrate, or even finding the right words. Just gone.
I like that hangover feeling, but without the fun night out beforehand.
Nailed it. And on top of that, you got sensory sensitivities. Some people, even though the migraine itself has left the building, everyday sounds and lights, still completely overwhelming.
Well, I bet. Like the world's just too much.
Exactly. And then get this, some people even report gastrointestinal issues, nausea, or their, bowel movements are all out of whack.
Wild. Right. The human body's a trip. See, I was looking at one study, and they mentioned people needing to pee more often during the postdrome. It's like your brain just can't catch a break, even when the pain's gone.
And that's why, I think it helps to kind of break down postdrome symptoms into categories because we start to see these patterns, right?
Makes sense. Bring some order to the chaos.
Exactly. So you've got those neurological symptoms, that brain fog, the difficulty focusing. Then there's the sensory stuff, the fatigue we talked about, and even those physical symptoms like the gut issues you mentioned.
Really highlights how impactful this whole phase can be. It's not just a headache you're dealing with. This is impacting like so many different parts of how you feel.
Absolutely. And yet, even though it's so common, the postdrome still gets overlooked way too often. In fact, one of the studies you sent over, they found that almost everyone who had a migraine triggered in a lab setting, they experienced a postdrome too.
Really? So they're basically guaranteed to get hit with it.
It was a whopping 98%.
Whoa.
But then you look at what goes down in a regular doctor's visit, and it's like the postdrome just doesn't exist, rarely gets discussed, sometimes not even recognized.
See, that's a huge disconnect. Why do you think there's such a gap between what all this research is showing and what's actually happening in, doctor's offices?
It's tough, right? Think about it. You just went through this whole migraine ringer, the pain, the sensitivity, all that. By the time it finally lets up, wouldn't you just want to forget the whole thing ever happened?
Oh, 100%. Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. So it makes sense that you might not even think to mention these kind of lingering symptoms to your doctor.
Like it's just the price you pay, right?
Yeah.
If you get a migraine, then this is just how it is for a while.
Yeah, you just assume it's normal after a migraine. But, and here's the important bit, it doesn't have to be that way.
Okay, so we can do something about it.
Exactly. And that's why understanding what the postdrome is, what it looks like, it's so crucial. It's not just, oh, this is interesting to know. It's about advocating for yourself, finding the right ways to manage it.
So being able to tell your doctor, hey, this is happening, even if you're thinking in your head, well, it's probably nothing.
And not minimizing it, right? Even if those postdrome symptoms seem kind of minor, talk about them. Because we know that electronic diary study you found, it showed that even mild postdrome symptoms, they can really mess with your quality of life.
It's not just in your head then. There's a real impact.
Oh, yeah, big time. And that's what we got to keep reminding ourselves, right? We're not just trying to squash headaches here. The goal is to get people back to functioning at their best.
It's like those ripples after you throw a rock in a pond. The migraine, that's the initial splash, but the postdrome, that's the expanding ring, messing things up way farther out than you'd think.
Perfect way to put it.
Speaking of messing things up, one thing that really struck me in all this research was, even when you do manage to kill the migraine pain, say, you pop a triptan, works like a charm.
Right, those are usually great for the pain.
But that doesn't mean the postdrome just goes poof and disappears.
It's true, the two aren't always attached at the hip like that.
It's like turning off the fire alarm, right?
Yeah.
But the smoke, it's still lingering.
Ooh, that's a good analogy.
So what gives? Why is that happening in the brain? There was something about the locus coeruleus.
Yes, the locus coeruleus. It's this tiny little area in your brainstem, but man, it does a lot.
Small but mighty, huh?
You got it. So it's involved in, like, your sleep-wake cycle, how well you pay attention, even your stress response. And now more and more research is saying, hey, this little guy might be a big player in why we get postdrome symptoms.
So if it's involved in, like, energy levels and focus, and it's all out of whack from the migraine, brain fog and fatigue make a lot of sense.
Bingo. Researchers are thinking that basically the electrical storm of a migraine, it kind of messes with how the locus coeruleus is supposed to work. So even when the storm's gone, it's still glitching out a bit.
And that's what we're feeling as the postdrome, all those leftover glitches.
Exactly. Now, this is still a pretty new area of research. We're not 100% sure on all the details yet.
Right, gotta keep digging.
But it's definitely a promising lead, could help us develop much more targeted treatments down the line.
It's like we're finally starting to put the pieces together, figure out not just what the postdrome is, but why it's happening.
And hopefully all that leads to better ways to help people manage it, maybe even prevent it completely one day.
So it's like we've been so busy battling the migraine itself, we've kind of missed this whole other side of it. But now that research is like shining a light on how the postdrome works, maybe we can actually do something about it.
Right. And this whole locus coeruleus thing, that's big, I think. Imagine if we could come up with treatments that zero in on those post-migraine brain changes specifically. We might be able to stop the postdrome from even happening.
Oh, wow. So not just treat the migraine, but like prevent that whole wave of crap afterward. That would be huge.
Totally. And listen, while we're waiting for those fancy new treatments, there's a lot we can do right now. Just being aware of the postdrome, knowing how much it can impact you and talking about it, that's huge already.
Yeah, no more suffering in silence. Get it out of the open.
Exactly. And that's where you, dear listener, you come in. Because like we've been saying, research on the postdrome, it's still got a ways to go.
There's more to learn, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked about, like, the classic migraine experience, but what about the postdrome with different kinds of migraine?
Ooh, good point. Does having aura change things? Or if you get chronic migraine versus like just one every now and then?
Yeah.
So many questions still.
And that's why it's so important to pay attention to what's going on in your own experience. Like, have you noticed any patterns with your postdrome, certain things that make it worse?
Right, like tracking that stuff?
Because that info you're gathering, it's gold, not just for managing your own migraines, but for helping us all understand this whole thing better.
So it's like we're all part of this big old research study just by living with migraine.
Kind of, yeah. The more we share, the more we talk to our doctors, the closer we get to answers.
And better treatments, hopefully.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole thing so exciting for me. It's not just about, like, studying symptoms in a vacuum. It's about actually improving the lives of, like, millions of people who deal with this.
It's about getting those days back. The ones you lose to the postdrome fog.
Yes. Reclaiming that time, getting back to doing the things you love.
Living your best life, migraine or no migraine.
You got it. And you know what? With more research, with everybody being open and talking about it, I'm hopeful. I really think we're moving towards a future where, yeah, you might get a migraine, but the postdrome, it doesn't have to control your life anymore.
Music to my ears. All right, well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive for now. But remember, everyone listening, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep those migraine logs coming. Keep sharing your stories. Keep asking questions. Let's kick migraine's butt, postdrome and all. Thanks for joining us.